strap over your neck in case you should lose control.
Alright then folks, so we're now safely out onto the River Bure. This river flows for about 25 miles all the way to Great Yarmouth, where it meets the sea and estuary called Broden Water. It also connects up to 6 other rivers and 63 shallow lakes to form the wonderful Norfolk Broads National Park. It's a really special area for wildlife. In fact, we've got 1/4 of all of Britain's rarest species living here, including some things that don't live anywhere else in the country. Now, I'm not talking about Richard, I'm talking about things like the swallowtail butterfly, things that don't live anywhere else, and Britain's biggest butterfly as well, a real Norfolk icon, Norfolk hawker dragonflies. It's also a bird watcher's paradise, got some of the best birding in the country, so some of the species that can be seen around the national park, including bitterns, cranes, marsh harriers, spoonbills, and many other things. On top of that, of course, we see kingfishers quite often. Most days we're lucky enough to see a kingfisher. Sometimes, very occasionally, see otters and many other species too, but mostly today we'll see great crested grebes, different types of geese, cormorants, that kind of thing. Of course, the Broads is most famous for boating holidays, and like the boats ahead of us and on our left, these are all boats we'll hire for a week or so to come and explore, and then they sleep on the boats, a bit like a floating holiday home. And then there's lots of little day boats people hire for the day or by the hour. And generally the Broads is a great place for fishing, sailing, canoeing, generally messing around in the river, which is what I've spent most of my life doing. I even get paid for it now, which is nice. Also there's plenty of history to talk about too, and in fact on that note we've just left one of the oldest boatyards on the Broads for tourism. It was set up way back in 1878. Our company too is pretty old. It was set up in the 1930s. And sticking with the historic theme, over on the right hand side we've got the Barton House Miniature Railway plus the Wherry Yacht Charter Trust. And you can see there's a big old wherry mast there, and if you look underneath the green tent you might just get a tiny little glimpse of a beautiful Edwardian wherry yacht. Now hopefully that's just a taster of what's to come, because earlier on the trip this morning rather, we saw a beautiful wherry out sailing. One of the ones affected the Wherry Yacht Charter Trust, the Wherry Yacht Dorada. So as long as they don't sail too far away, I'm hoping we might see them out on the trip later. Now the story of the wherries is that these very shallow bottom boats with huge single sails would have carried cargo all around the Broads for hundreds of years, because the Broads used to be used very much for trade rather than tourism. But that all changed in the late Victorian era when steam trains came to town and took away the trading business but brought tourists here for the first time. And Wroxham really prospered on that. Very quickly it became established as the capital of the Broads, which is still known as today, 100 years on. And it has some of the most beautiful riverside houses, as well as one of the busiest sections of river. It's not too bad for a bank holiday Monday, but yesterday was mental out here, honestly. So we're going to have a look at some of those riverside houses, and I'll point out some of my favourites as we head downstream. And many of these houses are worth millions of pounds. But if any of you have won the lottery lately, then I will just mention a couple that are up for sale. here is fly fishing for pike. You can see his fly going through the water. Normally you do that for trout and salmon, but he does it for pike with a stepped up gear. Pike are the big predatory fish that eat all the other ones. They go to enormous sizes of over 40 pounds. So we've got some of the biggest pike in the country. I caught a 25 pound pike in January this year and a 23 pound in the year before. So this house on the right hand side is one of the bigger properties. It's got its own private broad boat shed where they keep their snazzy boat. Nice big garden, isn't it? It's about the size of mine, but I haven't got a climbing frame in mine yet. Now over on the left hand side you can see a little blue and white holiday bungalow. That's called Leisure Hour. It's one of the original 1920s properties, so it gives you some idea as to what most of the houses would look like back in the day. And that's still a holiday rental all these years on, so they certainly got their money's worth out of the building, that one. Now this swanky house on the left is the latest house to be built in the village with all the glass frontage. There was a sort of older property there that they knocked down and then replaced it with this very tasty one which they finished off last summer. I'll tell you one thing I noticed though, it looks really, really stylish and they've spent millions of pounds on the job. They've got that very elegant boat shed, but look what's in the boat shed. One little pedalo, that's it. Nothing else. I think they needed to spend a little bit of money on a better boat. Otherwise, a lovely property. Okay, so I rather like the thatched properties we have here because that's the real Norfolk tradition. So what we do is all the reed cutters do, they cut the reeds in the winter time, put them in bushels from the marshes around here, and then they all get laid up on the slope of the roof. And then you can see there's a lovely capping. Now you need something more flexible to bend around the top of the roof, so they use another plant called saw sedge, which they cut in the summer months. The reed cutters cut the saw sedge this time of year, the reeds in the winter, and then it all gets tied in with a lovely little lattice work of hazelwood stakes. And each of those has a particular pattern, which is a bit like the signature of the thatch that did the work. So if we've got any millennials on board or kids on board, that's what they had before websites, just to explain that. Now this one's definitely not aimed at millennials, but if we've got any grandparents on board, you might be interested to know that this house on the right hand side was the former holiday home of George Formby. Now for anyone a bit younger, don't get too excited, that's not the bloke that did the boxing and the grills, that was George Foreman. George Formby played the ukulele, did lots of funny songs and was a movie star back in the sort of wartime era. And the fact that we're still talking about it now shows what a big star he was. Either that or no one else of significance has lived here since, I'm not sure which. But either way, people used to pile on our trip boats back in the 1950s to see if they could spot George Formby in his garden. And he got so fed up with this George Formby that he actually banned any of the skippers from pointing him out anymore. So I can see quite a few of you admiring the houses around here, thinking, wouldn't mind living here. But if that's you, you might be in luck, because we've got a couple that are up for sale at the moment. The first one here on the right hand side is the bigger of the two. It's got a 7-bedroom, 6-bathroom house with all this river frontage, 2 boat dikes leading to your own integrated boat sheds under the house, a huge 5-acre water garden out the back, and road access via your own private bridge. And it sounds perfect, doesn't it? The only slight sticking point is it's currently on the market for £2.5 million, and it was actually up for 3 million, so they've knocked £500,000 off. So that's still a bit over budget though. What about spending 850 grand on a glorified shed? That's how much this house on this 2-bedroom bungalow is on the right hand side. A little wooden 2-bedroom bungalow, the best part of £1 million. Unbelievable. And houses used to be cheap here in Norfolk. It's not like sort of London prices or anything. Norfolk was a nice place, cheap place to live, but things have changed along the river here in Wroxham in recent years. Lots of sort of big city money coming in, and the prices have got a bit silly really. Right, so also you can see that lots of the houses are made out of wood. You'd think if you're going to spend £1 million on the house, the least you can do is make it out of bricks and build it properly. But the reason that they make the houses out of wood is because the ground is very soft, being by the river. So if you had a brick house, it would just be a little bit too heavy and sink into the ground. So they make it out of wood to avoid that problem, and then prop the houses up with tubular steel pilings driven 20 or 30 metres down into the ground for extra support. And you see these last few houses are actually raised up above the ground, so should there be any flooding, we just go straight underneath the house and not cause too much of a problem. Alright, so we're just coming up to the last house in the village on the right now. It's a bit of a cracker because it's taken that idea of being lightweight out of wood and propped up on pilings like on stilts to extremes. And can you believe being built straight over the top of a dyke running between the river here and Wroxham Broad behind? So not only do you get a view of the Broad out the back of the house, the river out the front, you have the sort of idyllic ideal of having the water running right underneath your feet all day long. Sounds lovely, doesn't it? Until you start to think about this, and then you've got the ducks and the geese and everything piling underneath your feet day and night, making a right old hullabaloo. So I don't know whether you fancy that or not. I think it might drive me quackers though. I'm here all week. At this point people start screaming and thinking, oh my goodness, we got another hour and a half to put up with this. Right, so we're now out into the countryside and sort of in amongst a lot of what's called older car woodland, because the rest of the trip today we're going to be travelling through the Bure Marshes National Nature Reserve, and this is a really important wildlife sanctuary, a SSSI, a Site of Special Scientific Interest, managed by Natural England, our government conservation body. And there's a big wilderness broad out there called Hopton Great Broad that I'll talk about. Small amount of fenland and reed beds, but the vast majority of it is what we call older car woodland, and this is pretty much the closest thing you're going to find to jungle in the UK, which I think is quite nice because south of England is so overpopulated. The fact that there's some real sort of wilderness, virtually jungle out here, I think is pretty cool. And the reason it is so jungly is it's growing out of a swamp. So first of all, the trees are very wet and fast growing. So we've got alder, like we've got on the right with the dark green spherical leaves. We've got willow hanging over the water as well. Lots of birch too, like you can see behind the willow with the silvery branches. And also there's no humans in it to speak of because it's so wet and swampy. People can't really get in it, so it's just left wild and unmanaged.